Hello, I'm Jean-Philippe Courtois. This is Positive Leadership, the podcast that helps you grow as an individual, as a leader, and ultimately as a global citizen. Truly great leaders create the right conditions to awaken the potential with people. It requires a certain amount of skill, open-mindedness, flexibility, agility, and optimism. And above all, trust. In fact, some would argue nothing is as inspiring as offering trust. My guest today, Stephen M. R. Covey, is a global authority on trust, helping organizations and individuals to increase and leverage trust to achieve superior performance. He's also the best-selling author of The Speed of Trust and more recently, Trust and Inspire, or Truly Great Leaders Unleash the Greatness in Others. Stephen, I'm delighted to have you on the podcast.
Hi, it's so wonderful to be with you, Jean-Philippe. Very excited to have this conversation about trust and positive leadership.
Thank you so much, Stephen. So I'd like to start off with your childhood and family background, if you don't mind. Your father,
Please.
Stephen R. Covey, was the, of course, infamous author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the most influential business books of the 20th century, and I would say 21st century too, by the way. But I was moved to read the dedication to your late mother on Instagram recently, who I think referred to her as a true trust and inspire parent. So how did your mom and your dad and your 8 siblings, if I'm not mistaken, model trust and inspire? And how did that shape you? And what made you want to follow in your dad's footsteps and join the company setup? Many questions in one, so I'll let you uncover all of that, Stephen.
Well, thank you, JP. It was inspiring for me to have such magnificent parents. I was very fortunate, very blessed, and so I feel a sense of stewardship because of that. And I think both my mother and my father were what I call trust and inspire parents. And by that I mean they were parents who believed in me, who saw my potential, and who helped me come to see it in myself. And that's what I think a trust and inspire leader or person does for another, is that they see potential and talent, and then they communicate that potential and talent so that the other person can come to see it. And then they seek to develop it. And then they seek to unleash it, to really let the person have their opportunity to demonstrate it and show it. And having that kind of belief in you by somebody, and in this case by my mother, by my father, really helped me come to believe in myself. And help me develop my potential, such that I believe that this is such a powerful way of leading that I desire to do the same for others. And that's what this new book, Trust and Inspire, is all about, is how as leaders we can see, communicate, develop, and unleash the potential, the greatness that's inside of people. And it started really from how I grew up in my home with my father and my mother, and how they believed in me.
So would you mind maybe sharing 1 or 2 little stories about your mom, the way she saw your potential, Stephen, and the way she uncovered it, and your dad, because I'm sure they come with different angles and different ways of making that happen through your life.
Absolutely, yes. My mother always would affirm me and would state to me affirmations of who I was and what I could do. And believed in me in such a way that I began to say, well, maybe she believes in me so much, maybe I can do this. But she would validate that, she would affirm it, and she would give reasons why I could do this. And because it was not just ethereal of you can do this, it was more specific, tied to here's why you can do this. You have these kind of abilities and these talents. I've seen it firsthand. And so I would say affirmation was something that I heard time and again from her that was very direct, very specific, but such that I could actually see myself in the affirmation she was giving. And that's what I think was a hallmark of what I learned from her and what I felt from her.
Yeah.
And it happened in all aspects of my life.
And what about your dad, if I may? So wonderful to have that affirmation, giving you confidence, I guess, on specificity of your strengths or where you shine
Right.
at, where you're the best at. What about your dad? Was he less affirmative, more subtle, or how did it come through?
Well, he also would affirm, but what I would emphasize with my dad is how he would then extend trust and give me responsibilities and opportunities, starting from when I was just a 7-year-old boy.
Uh-huh.
In what he writes about in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People,
Yes.
green and clean. Green and clean, the story where he was teaching his young son to take care of our lawn, our yard.
Yes. Yes.
I was that green and clean child. I was the 7-year-old boy given this big responsibility. This was back in the day before we had automatic
Of
sprinklers,
course.
and we had this huge lawn, 3 different locations, and he turned the job over to me as a 7-year-old to take care of it. And he trusted me and he believed in me, but he built an agreement with me of how I would do this and how I would judge myself against the standard of green and clean. And we would walk around once a week with accountability, but I was responsible. And while at first I didn't respond initially, I then quickly responded to that trust that he gave and took responsibility for that job. And as a young 7-year-old, I took care of the yard, and it was green and it was clean. Not only that year, but for many years to come. So I would say that my father, he took the idea of affirmation and extended it to an actual extension of trust with expectations and with accountability built into the trust being extended, and how that brought out the best in me as well, as I realized that I was responsible, and I had these capabilities, and I could take ownership, and I could actually achieve and do things and get the result. But my father's intent all along was not so much that he had a great green and clean yard. He cared about that, but he cared far more about
you
developing me.
Yes, growing
Exactly.
you more than
That's
the land
right.
itself. That's
Exactly.
wonderful. Yes, please. Sorry. Please
Well,
do.
he summarized it as this: when at first I wasn't quite responding at first, he said, he kind of breathed in a deep breath, and he said, "Remember my purpose: raise children, not grass." So his real intent was always to raise the child. But the interesting thing is, he both raised the child and he got a green and clean lawn as well.
You got it. Super. So wonderful start, Stephen. Can you tell us? Obviously, you start with a strong foundation with your mom and dad, and you just did a wonderful job framing it. But what led you eventually to create the trust and inspire model, right? To formalize that through your life, I guess, experiences, learnings, mistakes, and more. And then one day, well, not just one day, I guess, a moment, you decide to make it clear, bring it clear to everyone. So what was the trigger to do that?
What the trigger was when I was able to spend time actually before my dad passed away, doing workshops and public seminars around the world with him.
Yeah.
And he would talk about 7 habits, and the 8th habit, I would talk about the speed of trust. But he would always begin each session by asking the audience, how many of you believe that the vast majority of your workforce has more talent, ingenuity, skill, capability, and greatness more than their current job requires or even allows them to contribute?
Yeah.
And almost every hand would go up. Everyone's saying there's a lot more talent inside of our people than we're asking or getting from them. Then the second question was, and how many of you are under immense pressure to do more with less? And again, almost every hand would go up. And just the juxtaposition of that we're under this intense pressure to produce more, and yet we're not tapping anywhere near into people's talents and capabilities. What's wrong with this picture? And I realized that's a leadership gap.
Issue.
The way we're leading is not tapping into that. And so I began to look at how we need to, a new world of work requires a new way to lead. And the old model, what I call kind of the command and control model, is not going to work in this new world. Even in a more enlightened version of it, if we view people like things, we need a way to tap into that talent and that capability and to unleash it and to see it, to develop it, all these things, so that we tap into the potential that's out there to solve our problems today. I love how Mahatma Gandhi put it. He said, the difference between what we are currently doing and what we are capable of doing would solve most of the world's problems. So trying to tap into that talent, to see it, to communicate it, to develop it, to unleash it, the talent, the greatness, the potential inside of people requires leadership. And we need to lead in a new way to tap into that kind of talent to solve our problems in our world today. So that's that process of seeing this gap and asking, why aren't we tapping into that, and really recognizing this is a leadership opportunity for all of us. And what if I could articulate a way to do it? And so the key was kind of the naming of this. And the idea was, rather than command and control, the old style of leadership, it's trust and inspire. A new way to lead in a new world of work.
No, wonderful setup, Stephen, for the coming dialogue actually on trust, because it's such a deep concern, but also such a deep opportunity, as you said. You know, I was just meeting actually with Richard Edelman last week, and he just issued his last version, you know, the famous Edelman Trust Barometer. It's a yearly barometer for people listening to the podcast. And he says that the macro pressures manifest at an individual level in a sort of fears ranging from inflation, of course, to nuclear war. Right now in Europe, we can feel it, I can tell you. And these fears are on top of pre-existing worries about job losses to automation, impact of climate change. And the consequence is a descent from distrust to an acute polarization in society that we can see, I'm sure, both in Americas, in Europe, and elsewhere in the world. And he predicts that without intervention, we'll see a continued move from a crisis of institutional trust to a crisis of interpersonal trust. So would you agree with that statement? And what comes out of that statement on top of your mind, given what you've seen in society, in business, across the world? You've been traveling the world as well, right here, right now, with what's going on in the world.
Yes, I do agree with that. First of all, I think the Richard Edelman and the Edelman Trust Barometer has been a very useful tool for the world to see what's happening with trust, to have these conversations every year with the Trust Barometer coming out. But I think the basic premise that the world in which we're operating, where there's a distrust in institutions and the like, and how we become polarized, that the reason I believe that will ultimately affect interpersonal trust is because distrust is contagious. It's kind of the environment we're operating in. And when we look and we wonder, can I trust this institution, and can I trust these people, and we get polarized into tribal camps, you start to wonder and question, who can you trust and what else is out there? And all of that is a pressure, and it impacts people. It starts to affect how they view not only the world, but even how they view other people and each other. And they sometimes are not even fully aware that they're being impacted by this low trust world, this low trust environment. But it begins to affect my interpretation of other people. And that, I wonder if I can trust this person. And we start to become less and less trusting. And if we're not trusting of others, then they tend to not trust us back. And we could find ourselves perpetuating a vicious downward cycle of distrust and suspicion, creating more distrust and suspicion, and everybody feeling justified in the process. See, distrust is contagious. And that's the danger of a low trust world. It tends to perpetuate itself. But I am more optimistic and believe that in the long run, that just like distrust is contagious, so is trust. And trust and confidence can create more trust and confidence. But I think these pressures are very real. I do think there's a ripple effect in either direction. And right now, because of the external and the lack of institutional trust, the distrust at the macro level, it does impact us at the micro level of how we even view each other. And especially if we're not fully aware that we look at the world through a lens.
Absolutely. So I'd like to build on that, Stephen. Actually, we often think about trust as a social asset, an enabler in society and business as much as within a family or a couple as well. From my experience as a leader, I know that establishing trust is fundamental if you want to get your team members to bring their very best authentic selves to the table. And also, if you want to build a safe environment where mistakes are addressed and tackled in a most effective way. But building trust can take a lot of time and patience as well. So the question for you and for our listeners, where do you start and how do you build trust one person and one team at a time?
It's a beautiful question. And I think that where you start is by looking in the mirror and starting with yourself, with ourselves, each of us.
Yes.
We look in the mirror and we ask this question: do I trust myself? Do I trust myself? Do I give to my team, to my colleagues, to my family, to my neighborhood, to those I interact with? Do I give to them a person, a leader who they can trust? Is it smart to trust me? That self-trust, trust of yourself, giving others a person that they can trust, is the foundation of all trust. And then from there, you do ripple out into your relationships, one person at a time, one relationship at a time. And then you can ripple out to a team, maybe your team.
Yep.
So it's not that I'm trying to change the whole world. Instead, I'm trying to impact my team by first impacting my relationships one-on-one and by modeling it myself. And then I work on my team, and then I ask, what if our team could become a catalyst to build trust with another team that we interact with, and then with another and another, and you begin to ripple out into the larger department, and then you ripple out into the whole organization, and then out to our stakeholders with partners and customers, and then out into society, into communities. So it's always inside out. It's simple. Yeah. It's just not easy. Simple, but not easy.
But if
it's always inside out.
Inside out. I love it. But if I may, I'd like to come back to the first ripple in a way, right? Myself. Yes. How do I trust myself? How did you do that with yourself, Stephen? Taking that example, or maybe the work you've done coaching some leaders and others across the world. How do you do that? Because it's not easy as well to look at yourself in a mirror by yourself and say, yeah, hey, Stephen or JP, I'm trusted. No, I can diffuse that trust to others.
Right. I think two things that can help increase self-trust. First is to learn to make and keep commitments to yourself.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the fastest way to build trust with another person is to make a person a commitment and then to keep it.
Yes.
And make another commitment and to keep it and to repeat that process. You make, keep, repeat. Make, keep, repeat. You build trust that fast that way. Guess what? That's also the fastest way to build trust with yourself.
With you.
To make and keep commitments to yourself. And sometimes we don't keep a commitment to ourselves with the same respect we might treat a commitment to somebody else. But we should with ourselves as well, and have that sense of clarity, of integrity, of power, personal power with ourselves. But also, if we can focus on saying, look, I'm trying to focus on my character and my competence. So my credibility, I'm always working on it. I never arrive, but I'm always working on my character, my competence, and behaving myself into greater trust because it matters to me, and I'm trying to model. I'm trying to go first and be a model of the kind of behavior I want to see. So if I want to see more transparency, then I model transparency. If I want to see more respect shown and demonstrated, I model respect. And if I want to see more trust, then I model both trustworthiness, but also a willingness to be trusting, to extend that trust. So maybe, JP, I would just add that last thing. As you work from the inside out, starting with yourself and then your relationship, and then with others and teams and so forth, if you as a leader, if you'll focus on two things, first, focus on being trustworthy, and that's your character, your competence. You be a model. But second, focus on being trusting, on giving the trust and extending the trust. Because if you think about it, you could have two trustworthy people working together, and yet no trust between them, even though they're both trustworthy, if neither person is willing to extend trust to the other. So not only do we have to be trustworthy, which is modeling, we also need to be trusting. And I think that is the essence of great leadership, is that we extend that trust to others and ignite the potential and talent that's within them. I think it's an act of leadership to extend trust to another person.
I do agree with you 100%, Stephen. I love the way you make that deep distinction between your trust in yourself, and the way you have to keep commitments and execute on your own commitments, which is not easy. Depending on the way you raise the bar, sometimes you have to take it easier as well on yourself. That's a different discussion. And the way you are trusting others and empower them to do more with that. So, in your book as well, to continue the discussion, you made it clear that trust, of course, is a very powerful enabler and transformer if you can inspire others as well. But there's a lot of confusion I found often between charisma, inspiration, and a few other words. So what's the difference, Stephen? And how do you create the spark of inspiration? How do you build it within yourself? Maybe that start within yourself, and then propagate that with some positive energy coming from yourself to others.
Yes, and I love how you distinguished this and phrased it, that inspiration and charisma are different. I know some people who are charismatic, but who are not inspiring.
I agree with you.
I know other people who no one would describe necessarily as charismatic, but who are extraordinarily inspiring because of who they are, how they connect, how they care, how they lead. And so they're different. Inspiring others doesn't necessarily require charisma. Inspiring others is a learnable skill. It's something we can learn to do. And you are right. We start with ourselves. We model. When you model the behavior, that's inspiring to other people. When you extend trust to them, that inspires. To be trusted is the most inspiring form of human motivation. But then what really makes this connect and resonate is when you connect with people through a sense of caring and belonging. That will inspire others. Connection through caring and belonging. And then when you connect people to purpose and to meaning and to contribution, that will inspire. And if you start with yourself, if you are inspired because you have a sense of purpose, if the fire within you is already lit, then that lit fire can light other fires. But if the fire within you is gone out, is snuffed out because of the challenging world we're in and we've lost our inspiration, our spark, it's hard to light another fire. So always, start with yourself and find your why, become inspired, your purpose, and then focus on connecting with people through caring, and then connecting others to purpose, to meaning, to contribution, to mattering. And the whole idea is that everyone can inspire. It's actually a learnable skill. It's not just for the charismatic. I'll give one last thought on inspiration.
Yeah, please.
And that is, it comes from the Latin word inspirare, which means to breathe life into. So when we inspire, we're breathing life into relationships, into teams, into cultures, whereas command and control tends to suck the life out of. Trust and inspire breathes the life into, and we ignite the fire that's within. Inspiration is intrinsic, whereas motivation is external, outside of us. You have to provide more rewards. Inspiration is internal; it's inside of people. You light that fire within, which can burn for months, maybe even years, without having to go back to external stimuli. That's a far better way to lead in our world today, to move from motivation to inspiration, and everyone can learn to inspire.
I love it, and I can almost visualize the fires of inspiration you talked about, Stephen. Indeed, one of the things I enjoyed the most in my life is, over the past several years now, I've been coaching a bunch of young social entrepreneurs who want to change the world. And guess what? Many of them don't have the confidence in themselves at the beginning, don't have the charisma at all, but they have so much purpose, so much clarity on the way they want to change the world. They are incredibly inspiring. And we get them on stage after, of course, doing some work on the semantics, the words and all of that.
Right.
Wow. The people who are much more grown up than themselves are like incredible. They are all impressed by the inspiration. So I've seen that in action. It's highly contagious in a positive way.
Absolutely. And it's within people. And when they can find that within themselves and then connect to that broader idea of purpose and a meaning and a contribution, of significance, of mattering, leaving a legacy, that inspires. And I really believe that we can create and embed purpose, meaning, and contribution into almost any role, into almost any organization, if we're intentional about it and really seek to serve others, to bless, to serve human needs, seek to bless, not to impress. That will inspire. And these examples of these social entrepreneurs that you work with, that it may be that at their stage of their career that they don't have necessarily that platform yet, but if they have that sense of who they are, what they're about, and the sense of purpose, meaning, and contribution, and then they can connect with a motive of caring and making a difference and mattering, that will inspire. And that lights the other fires in others, and we can really have this become contagious, just like trust. So both trust and inspiration can be contagious.
Love it. Let's continue the dialogue and, in a way, extend the discussion on leadership. In your book, you describe leadership as a stewardship, right? First, you model the behaviors you want to see, and this builds trust. Interestingly, at Microsoft, we created and implemented a management framework, Stephen, called Model, Coach, and Care. So as you work with many large companies in the world and their leadership teams, right, how do you get them to practice what care means and what model implies in their day-to-day lives? Because words sometimes are big on a wall, on a slide, but, making them real in your life is something else. So how do you do that?
Yeah, and making it come alive is where the real action is.
Exactly.
So, well, first of all, let me say this at the outset, that I love the Microsoft model of model and coach and care. And I've spent time with Kathleen Hogan and you, JP, and others, and I know that how Satya Nadella has led. And if you look at the core model in the Trust and Inspire book, it's the same three principles. I just slightly label it different. I'm calling it modeling, trusting, inspiring. But in a very real sense, to model, trust, inspire is very similar to model, coach, and care. Because modeling is modeling. That's 100% bullseye hit. So we model. When you model that, people get inspired by that, but they also have a way forward. They can see what to do. When you trust another, you move from managing people to coaching because you believe in them, you trust them. So you don't have to manage them. No. You're trying to coach them and help them succeed. So that's a mindset shift. But the fundamental belief that triggers that enables that, is your belief in them, your extension of trust to them, that moves you from a management model to a coaching model, and where from a controlling model to a trusting model. And so I believe that that's a beautiful alignment as well. And learning how to extend that trust with expectations and accountability so that you both get the job done and you do it in a way that grows the person. That's the real magic, because you want to deliver results in a way that grows the person through the extension of trust. That's trusting. And, in the Microsoft language, that's the coaching. And finally, the care, I call it inspire. And I'm saying that inspiring others comes when you connect with people through caring. So that's very much what you're doing at Microsoft, the caring. And when you care for another, you will inspire them. It inspires in others when they feel that there's a sense of caring, a relationship of caring. And you might even say in some situations of love. But also, you will inspire when you connect to purpose and to meaning and contribution. And again, I know that Microsoft also has focused on purpose as a way of inspiring as well. And so I believe there's a beautiful overlay. And I think if leaders see that I have these three stewardships, to model, to trust, and inspire. That's what by a stewardship, I mean a job with a trust. These are responsibilities that come with leadership, not rights. They're responsibilities of what my people can expect from me and should expect from me, that I will model, that I will trust and be trusting, and that I will inspire by connecting with people and connecting to purpose. And if I kind of go into that that these are stewardships, responsibilities I have. How can I lead out by modeling, trusting, inspiring? It becomes a mindset for who I am and how I lead and the kind of leadership that people are going to respond to in our world of work today. It's such a better approach than the traditional command and control, and I'm the boss, I'm in charge, positional leadership. That's just not relevant in a new world of work with multiple generations and Gen Z and millennials that don't want to be managed, that want to be led, that want to be trusted, that want to be inspired.
So well said, Stephen, and so much in alignment in a way with the way we try to do it every day, because it's not a given, it's hard work. It's a practice as well.
It's a journey.
Yes, a journey. So extending the dialogue on stewardship, right? And as you said rightly, it's not just about leadership rights, it's actually a lot more about leadership duties and accountabilities and what you need to do. Bringing clarity around what's working, what's not working in a business, in a company like Microsoft and others. It's something we have to think a lot about every day, right? It's called accountability in many ways. And so I'd like to get your thoughts on the best way to do that and about the role of accountability within that trust building that you talked about. And just to add a couple of more, another story actually to enrich a little bit the discussion, I had Pete Carroll, that I'm sure you may know from as the head coach of the Seahawks on the show, on the podcast a while ago. A wonderful discussion. He is, maybe as you know, holding a weekly accountability meeting with the Seahawks. And he told me, it's super important for people to fulfill their potential. It's a time where everyone, it's on Monday, is encouraged to put their hand up and say, I messed up, I could have done this better, coach or team. And as I discuss the potential of positive leadership, there's often a misconception that being positive most of the time stops you from holding people accountable and driving high-quality performance. So, Stephen, in your own experience, how do you balance the care you show for people, the trust you build in them, with the need for real accountability? And you also believe with the value of accountability meetings, whatever the shape of those meetings are, by the way.
Yes, beautiful. I do. And I believe completely with what Pete Carroll said and with what you're describing here, JP, that this accountability is essential both for the building and the maintaining of trust, but also for the development and the unleashing of the potential, both. And here's how it works, because you're right. Sometimes people, they paint it as an either or, kind of, are you going to hold me accountable or are you going to trust me? Yeah. As if they were two different things. Yeah. Yeah. But no, they're interconnected. Absolutely. They're very much related. When we extend trust to others, we're always doing it with a sense of the clear expectations around the trust that we're extending, and a mutually agreed upon process for accountability to those expectations. And so I call this building the agreement together. So you build the agreement together, which has two halves: clarifying expectations and agreeing to a mutual process of accountability to those expectations. And if up front you build that agreement together, then you can find as a leader that you can be far more trusting of others and give them more trust because you've built an agreement with expectations and accountability. So as a leader, you're not losing control. It's not hierarchical micromanagement control. No, it's control through the agreement, control through the relationship, through context, as opposed to I have to hover over and micromanage the person. No, we built an agreement, and the person holds themselves accountable to the expectations of that agreement, and they report back as we agreed together. And that way I become more of a coach and a mentor, and I help them, and yet there's accountability built right into the process. And look, this is even what my father did with me with the Green and Clean story when I was 7 years old. Because he spent 2 weeks training me that I want the yard, the lawn, to be green and clean. So those were the expectations, the green and clean. But then he built a process for accountability where he said this. So what we're going to do is let's walk the yard once a week, and you tell me how we are doing against the standard of green and clean. So that was the process for accountability, that once a week we would walk the yard and I would report on how we were doing against the standard of green and clean, the expectations. And so even as a young 7-year-old, he trusted me, but always with expectations and accountability. And what that does is that brings out the best in people.
Absolutely.
And they do develop that potential, and they keep the trust, because if we don't have expectations and accountability, at some point we'll lose the trust.
Yeah.
Well, it will become a blind trust without, it's not tied to the results and the outcomes, and it won't work. And we'll kind of pull back and say, oh, I've got to hover over and micromanage because I got to get these results. And people won't hold themselves accountable. So without the accountability, you'll neither get the same results, but you also won't have the same level of trust. But with the accountability built in the process of building the agreement, you'll get better results, because you'll then move into a coaching model to help the person succeed, and you build a higher level of trust with the person. So you really win on every front, where you get results in a way that grows the person. And so vital to achieve that. And the key is do it together, build the agreement together. Then the person can hold themselves accountable, as opposed to you having to hover over and micromanage their every move when you don't have an agreement.
I love the way you are resisting to the famous tyranny of or, right, Stephen? It's not trust or inspire, it's trust and inspire together. I love it.
Precisely.
That's part of the art of leadership. And what would be
it's trust and inspire, and it's also this: it's get the job done and grow the person.
And grow the person.
That's not either or.
Agreed.
That's always both too. That's what trusting does. We can get the job done better and do it in a way that grows the person.
That grows the person. And so what would be, in a simple way, what would be the kind of a common best practice that you could share with our listeners in a podcast on where to start to incorporate that in their own day-to-day, weekly, monthly routines? How would you advise them to do that?
Yes, I would say this, that if you could always say, look, I know that by trusting others and extending trust, that tends to bring out the best in people. It tends to inspire them. They tend to reciprocate and return the trust, and they also grow and develop. So this is a good thing. But I also know that I'm responsible for results. So I've got to get the results and the outcome.
Yep.
So I want to do it through trusting people. But if I don't build that agreement, I could find that I could run awry and get off track and have it become a blind trust instead of a smart trust, and not get the result and have this not work. And then I feel like I have to now come in and hover over and micromanage, and then it looks like I don't trust them. So I recognize I want to get results in a way that grows people. The way I do that is through trusting. But the only way I want to trust is always by building the agreement and by focusing on those two halves of the agreement, clarifying expectations, practicing accountability. And so I'm looking at every situation where I'm extending trust, and I say, are there clear expectations? Have we agreed to a process of accountability? Have we done this together? If you build the agreement together, then you've involved people, and there's far more commitment, and they'll perform better, and they will hold themselves accountable against the agreement you build together. It's just a far better way of doing it than you kind of hovering over and micromanaging and saying, I'm going to hold you accountable. No, they hold themselves accountable against the agreement you built together. Absolutely. It's a far better way of doing it. So the way to really operationalize it is look at all your trust relationships where you as a leader have extended trust and ask, what's the quality of the agreement that we built? Are there clear expectations? Is there an agreed upon process of accountability to those expectations? And always come back to that, knowing that the better you build the agreement, the more you'll get better results, but also the more you'll truly grow the person. And that's what we're seeking, because then our ability to get results in the future has just gone up when people have grown and developed. So come back time and again to the quality of the agreement that you're building together. And one more thing, to the quality of the relationship that you have together. Because the higher the quality of that relationship, the more authentic and real It will be, and the more people will be very real about how they're genuinely doing. They know more than you do on how they're doing against their results and the outcomes. And when they trust you, they'll be more open and real and honest with you.
No, this is so true, and I think so powerful, Stephen, when you can bring that into action. You know, I spend a lot of time, business, professional, social, personal life, coaching people across different teams. And I was speaking recently to my colleague Amy Hood, who is Microsoft CFO, on a podcast, actually. And she's really clear that a manager's job is to provide supportive autonomy, that's her words, to give people the room they need to succeed in whatever it is that they want to achieve. And building on that dialogue, the common belief is that a leader needs to act with authority, but there will be times when you have to correct someone's behavior. So how can you be authoritative without being authoritarian? Sorry for my French accent, but I guess you picked up the two words.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is critical because if, the cynic or the critic might listen to this conversation and saying, okay, this is nice, but is this the real world where I've got to deliver and there's pressure and I got quarterly earnings, I got to do it now and I'm in charge? Well, again, it's the power of the and. It is not the either or. It's just the whole premise is, look, we need to get results. And we also need to grow the people. So this is not either or, it's and. And that's what Trust and Inspire Leadership is all about, getting results in a way that grows the people. And when you model, when you trust, and when you inspire, and by trusting, that includes building the agreement with expectations and accountability in a way that grows the person. And by inspiring, you connect with people through caring and belonging, but then connect people to the broader ideas of purpose and meaning and contribution. That inspires. When you model and you trust and you inspire, then you are like a third alternative than the either or of, this guy's just too hard, the authoritarian, this guy's too soft, they're abdicating and abandoning. No, you're trust and inspire. And that is when you become authoritative without being authoritarian. A trust and inspire leader can be decisive without being autocratic. A trust and inspire leader can be strong without being forceful. A trust and inspire leader can be demanding without being demeaning or overbearing. And a trust and inspire leader can be in charge and have control without being controlling. They do it through the agreement. They do it through context and the relationship and the culture that you built. And so it is not an either or, it is an and. It's a better way to lead in our world. It is strong and not weak. And that's the kind of leadership that is needed today, to model, to trust, to inspire. It's what Satya is doing. It's what others, Cheryl Batchelder, who ran Popeyes, what she did. It's what others are doing. It's the kind of leadership that is needed today. It's a third alternative than the traditional kind of command and control or the kind of laissez-faire, complete abandon, abdicate and abandon. That's not going to work either. No, trust and inspire, which is strong without being forceful. That's the idea. It's authoritative without being authoritarian, to use your words.
Super clear and incredibly strong, actually, Stephen. Many thanks for making this Trust and Inspire story so real for listeners and really landing it. Now, I'd like to shift gears, and if you don't mind, come back to the foundational work of your dad. I'm talking about the amazing bestseller, of course, that he published in 1989 that I think has sold more than 40 million copies in the world, if not 50. It's a huge number, incredible. Of course, I've read it many times in my life as well. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. In it, if I may, you know it much better than I do, he defined 3 clusters of impact you can build and develop to become highly effective. The first cluster is independence or self-mastery. The second one is interdependence. And the third one is self-renewal. I'm struck by the similarity with the positive psychology and positive leadership approach, actually, Stephen. With the positive leadership philosophy, I tend to use this 3 ripples analogy. And in a way, you've started to relate to that already in this podcast. And I'm describing how to develop and grow positive mindsets, starting with me, the first ripple, which is about developing my self-awareness, my self-confidence, building on my strengths, and also the ability to manage my positive energy, physical, mental, cognitive, emotional, positively, so that I can actually align with my purpose. The second ripple is, of course, me and others. how you learn how to care, which we discuss a lot, how to communicate positively as well with others, not with naivety, but actually positively, and how to coach others to grow, to make them actually grow and achieve more in their lives. And finally, you get to the third ripple, which is all about the way you build a deep alignment between you, your personal purpose, and the bigger mission of the team, the organization, the community, the football club, whatever you belong to make a positive impact in the world. So I'd love to know if and how your dad and you have been influenced or not by the positive psychology philosophy and work of the last decades, actually, Stephen. And where do you see alignment and differences as well, nuances in both approaches?
Yes. Wonderful question. And the short answer is absolutely. I think there's an extraordinary alignment between the work my father did and this positive leadership, and the work that I'm doing on trust and this positive leadership. And because the basic approach that my father had, and that I also have kind of adopted, building on, standing on the shoulders of my father, is this inside out model, which is the gist of the descriptors you've described of these three circles, these three rings of me, and then me and others, and then me and the world. And so that's inside out. And so, we might use different language or nomenclature to describe it, but the principle is the same. And the principle is inside out. It always starts with ourselves. And you're right, the first, in the 7 habits, the first 3 habits are what my father called the private victory.
Yeah.
The victory with self, and that moving from dependence to independence.
Yep.
That private victory. And the next 3 habits, habits 4, 5, and 6, is the public victory. Now you are able to work and succeed with others interdependently, and that's a higher value. Interdependence is a higher value than independence, because it includes independence, but it also goes beyond now to how we relate with others and how we work with others to achieve greater things together. But interdependence is a choice that only independent people can make. And so it's always inside out. Exactly. But then we ripple out into a broader effect of how we then overlap who we are and how we relate to the world and our purpose with how we can contribute to making purposes in society and to making a difference, to matter, to move really from success to significance.
Yes.
And overlapping individual purpose with organizational purpose or community purpose or societal purpose. And I call this co-purposing. And when you overlap that, overlapping purpose, your individual purpose with organizational or community or societal purpose, that's when you tap into great capacity and power and contribution and to truly mattering and making a difference and unleashing the greatest potential that we have inside of us. And that's where we want to get. And so I think there's an extraordinary alignment and between the positive leadership approach and what we call the principle-centered leadership approach.
Yes.
Because we are drawing upon a fundamental principle that's inside out, and I think that applies everywhere throughout the world, and in any leadership position, in any role, it always starts with ourselves looking in that mirror and owning it and taking responsibility and rippling out from there. And my work on trust, I've done a similar thing. Is I've focused on the 5 waves of trust, which is another version of those 3 circles. Self-trust leads to relationship trust, which leads to team and organizational trust, which leads to market and stakeholder trust, which leads to community and societal trust. Inside out. So if you want to build trust in the society, start by looking in the mirror with ourselves and ripple out from there. We get enough of these ripple effects going on, we'll impact our world. We'll change our world and get those sparks like you were mentioning earlier, those sparks of inspiration going. It's contagious, and we can ripple and affect others. And this is not a nice to have dream. It's real. It's practical. It's tangible. And all it takes is to focus on one relationship. So maybe what I would say to our listeners and our viewers is try this, test this, become a trust and inspire person to another. Because I'll bet if you think about it, that each of us, most of us, if not all, have probably had someone in our life who believed in us, who had confidence in us. Maybe someone else believed in us more than we ever believed in ourselves, and saw potential and greatness and talent. Maybe they gave us an opportunity, and we didn't feel like we were ready, and they said, no, you're ready. You can do this. You got this. And they gave us that chance. And with such a person, whether it be a boss or a leader or a coach or a friend or a mentor or a family member or someone in the community, someone who believed in you, who saw your potential, who had confidence in you, someone who trusted and inspired you. Think on such a person and what that did to you, how it made you feel, how you responded to it, and how you saw yourself differently because of them. And now I ask, as you reflect upon such a person, what if you were to become that kind of leader, mentor, coach for another? And rather than trying to take on everything all at once, start with one relationship.
One at a time again, yes.
One at a time. Identify one relationship you'd like to transform through you becoming a trust and inspire person, figure, leader in that person's life, just like someone has been in your life. And just start there. You model, you trust, you inspire. It's simple. It's just not easy. But this is the kind of leadership that's needed today, Jean-Philippe. And you are a good illustration of this, what you're doing with this podcast to influence people, to ignite that fire within and get a lot of fires lit, and the impact that this can have in the world to counteract what we see going on in our world of distrust everywhere. We're trying to counteract that and say, yes, but there's pockets of trust and confidence and inspiration that also can spread, and we're going to focus on that. We're going to lead from the inside out, and ultimately we're going to try to move from success to significance in our society. So What an honor to be with you.
Last couple of questions, Stephen, but before shifting gears, I would say, I visualize not only the fires of trust, but also visualize the waves and the sea of the changes happening in the world. So I can see a full landscape, in front of me.
I love it.
With your wonderful...
That's vision.
Wonderful dialogue, Stephen. One thing I believe has changed since 1989, when your fathers obviously published this, the famous book, is the desire by most people now, not just the Gen Zs, to take a job that is meaningful, in harmony with their values and purpose. And of course, the young generation in particular cannot imagine working for a company that does not drive a positive impact in society through its action, investment, whether it's carbon negative organization or companies building an inclusive and ethical culture and more. So what is your take on those new demands, and how do you rationalize that, if that's a proper word, I'm not sure, that additional dimension to the framework, which might be building a positive change in the world, potentially become a new habit for highly effective people? That's a question, not a suggestion. That positive change in the world, is it somewhere already included into the framework you have, or is it developing because of the outside coming to the inside now of the world and people asking for that alignment with where they want to see the change in the world?
I think it's beautiful. It's a very insightful question. So let me answer that on two fronts. First, in my father's work, so 7 Habits was kind of contained the way we described, and those 3 domains, the private victory leading to public victory, and then the renewal of it so that we can expand out. And then my father, some 15 years later, after writing 7 Habits, wrote another work that he called The 8th Habit.
Yes.
And it wasn't that he forgot one.
Yeah.
So it's not trying to say I forgot a habit. What he did was he added a new dimension to all of this by doing what you just described, Jean-Philippe. He added this sense of purpose and contribution to everything that we're doing. And he entitled the 8th habit this: find your voice and inspire others to find theirs. And so that find your voice is connect to your purpose.
Yes.
to what matters. And do that first, and then inspire others to connect to their purpose, to find their voice. So he called it voice. By voice, he meant to purpose and meaning and contribution, and to your uniqueness and your talents as well. Find your voice and inspire others to find theirs. So he made the evolution that you described of saying there is something beyond just being effective. And he called it moving from effectiveness to greatness. So that there's a greater purpose in what it's all about. It's not just that I'm effective. I'm now moving to contribution and to making a difference. And then for me in my work, this is it's actually written right into my core model, which is those three things. As trust-inspired leaders, we model, we trust, and we inspire. So that third point, we have a stewardship, a responsibility to inspire those who we lead. And again, that doesn't mean that we're necessarily charismatic. We might be, we might not be. But what it does mean is that we model the behavior, we extend trust to people, which inspires, but then we connect with people through caring at the relationship level, and through creating a sense of belonging and inclusion at the team level. So we connect with people through caring and belonging. But then it's vital that we connect people to purpose and to meaning and to contribution, to mattering, to making that difference, to overlapping purpose, and allowing them the opportunity to see how what they're about can overlap with what we're about, what we're trying to do, so that we tap into that, so that we inspire those that we lead and not just manage them, and not just motivate them. You know, motivation is carrot and stick, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just limited. It can go so far. You know, do rewards work? Sure, they motivate people to want to get more rewards. But inspiration goes beyond motivation. It's internal. It's intrinsic. When that fire is lit inside, again, it can burn for years without the need for constant new stimuli. And it can give people that sense of purpose and mission and contribution. And when they find their own, and then you seek to overlap it, to co-purpose with what we're about. That's what people want. They want to matter. They want to leave a legacy. They want to make a difference. They want to contribute. A contribution. My father used to always say this: life is about contribution, not accumulation. So it's about making that difference and overlapping this. It is about inspiring in doing this. And so to me, it's built right into my core approach. That a leader has three stewardships: to model, to trust, and to inspire. And in the inspire, it's both caring, but it's also purpose, meaning, and contribution. We've got to overlap that intentionally. And we lead out. We go first as a leader.
What a better way, thank you so much, Stephen, to ask you the very last question. Which is more personal in a way. So I'd like to ask you the question about your own purpose and your own legacy, Stephen, because I know you've been thinking a lot about that. What is it you want to leave behind? What is it you would love your kids, family, friends, clients, and many more who have followed you and your dad to bring to life in their own lives? Tell us.
Thank you. I hope to be a catalyst, along with many others, to help bring about a renaissance of trust and inspiration in our world, to intentionally and deliberately focus on increasing both trust and inspiration in our world. Because as we started off with, as you looked at the Edelman Trust Barometer in your conversation with Richard Edelman, that we're living in a world of declining trust at the macro level, the societal level, that's starting to impact us at the interpersonal level, and potentially even at the personal level. And so it's very easy to kind of have that snowball and the ripple effect, the vicious downward cycle happen. I want to be a catalyst, along with others like yourself, Jean-Philippe, and many others, to help actually counteract that and to bring about a virtuous upward spiral of greater trust and greater inspiration in our world, to light those fires within, and to help those fires light other fires, and to have this ripple effect metaphor and concept be happening everywhere to help bring about a renaissance of trust in our world, and bring about a better world in the process. So that's my personal mission. It's what drives me, and it's why I keep doing what I'm doing, is because I recognize, rather than being discouraged by a low trust world, I'm saying all the more reason in a low trust world why we need leaders and mentors and coaches and examples and models who are going to lead out and bring it about a high trust world and a better world to live in, who know how to trust and inspire and bring about this renaissance of trust that we need. That's my mission, my purpose. It's what I'm trying to be about. And I'm not presenting myself as a perfect model. I am saying it's what I aspire to help do and to help bring about this renaissance of trust. So that's who I am and what I'm about.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It's been such a wonderful, wonderful discussion together. And I really look forward with many others to join this new Renaissance movement in 2023 to build trusting, caring, inspiring, and positive leaders that the world needs so more of these days. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, Stephen. I'm sure that our listeners will enjoy that tremendously.
Wonderful. I'll give you this last thought. Well, it takes 2 or more people to have trust. It only takes 1 to start. And each of us can be that one.
Can be that one. Let's be that one.
Let's be that one.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe. I really admire you and the tremendous work you are doing to increase trust in our world and inspiration.
Thanks so much for a wonderful contribution.